Hello there and welcome to the Richie Allen Show. How are you? You might remember me from such radio shows as the Richie Allen Show. It's lovely to be with you. This is a brand new TV show going out weekly on multiple platforms. More about that later on. But in the meantime, welcome to the show. Fully interactive show. We'll give you email details on screen and all of that. Social media details a little bit later on. Really excited about the first show. It's coming to you from Manchester, God's country in the northwest of England. Because we are coming from Manchester, guest number one on the programme, our first guest is none other than Bez. You might remember Bez from such terrific bands as the Happy Mondays and Black Grape. Many other things as well, reality TV programmes like Big Brother and lots of other stuff. He's a terrific guy, Bez. We're interviewing him on the show later on because his reality party is standing, well, he's standing for the reality party in Salford in Greater Manchester. He's standing on the single issue of fracking. So more from Bez a bit later on. So lots to tell you about on today's show. I'm going to start off today with vaccines, vaccinations, and the whole controversy about vaccinations in the alternative media. Before I do that, I want to play you a clip. This is Tony Abbott. If you don't know who he is, don't worry about it. He's a politician. He happens to be the Prime Minister of Australia. And recently, in fact, only a couple of days ago, he's been threatening people whom receive state benefits in Australia that if they don't vaccinate their children from the 1st of January next year, they might lose those benefits. Take a look at Tony Abbott.
On the weekend, the government made an important announcement about keeping our children safe and keeping our families secure. We have to make sure that everyone is vaccinated for the safety of our community. So in future, if you're not vaccinated, we'll have a no jab, no play. In fact, a no jab, no pay rule. I want to say thank you to all of the people who've been in contact with me and my office over the last few days. This is obviously an issue which is very important to the community. It's important to me as a father, as well as a Prime Minister, and we'll have a lot more to say about childcare in the lead up to the budget.
So that was Tony Abbott there, the Australian Prime Minister, basically threatening the poorest people in society that if you don't vaccinate your children, we're going to take your benefits away from you. Where's all this coming from? What's changed in the 25, 30 years since I received my vaccines? We'll get into that maybe in future programmes. Not all public figures and politicians agree with Abbott, though. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's had a lot to say recently on the subject of vaccinations. It must be said in the interest of fairness that in principle, he's in favour of vaccinating against certain diseases. He's got a problem, though, with the proliferation of vaccinations, the ingredients that go into making up those vaccinations, and the fact that these huge pharmaceutical companies who take part in the billion-dollar-a-year industry that is the vaccine industry, that these companies have been made exempt from prosecution in the United States of America. Have a listen to Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
And there's two areas of corruption in the CDC vaccine division. The first is the division that chooses which vaccines to add to the schedule. Now, when I was a little boy, I got 5 vaccines. My children got, the older ones got 22 vaccines. The younger ones got 69 vaccines. And these vaccines keep getting added to the schedule. They began in 1989. The CDC changed the schedule and doubled the amount of mercury in vaccines. They did that because in 1986, the pharmaceutical industry was given by Congress immunity from lawsuits. So it suddenly became very, very profitable to make vaccines, and an industry that once had been kind of a stepchild of Big Pharma now became one of the profit centers because they could make a product that the federal government orders 189 people to buy. There's no advertising, there's no marketing, the patents never expired, and you can't be sued. So no matter how badly you make that product, no matter how many defects it has in it, nobody can ever hold you accountable. So they began making these vaccines and adding them to the schedule, and when a pharmaceutical company adds that vaccine to the schedule, the value of it to that company could be as much as $1 billion.
So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. there. In future programs, we will be talking to medical professionals, men and women, who've got a different take on vaccinations and the makeup of vaccinations and what they're really being used for we'll get into that. I'll say one final thing on it though. It's never been mentioned on the MSM, the mainstream media, but late last year, around about August time, widely reported in the alternative media, William Thompson, who's a real guy and who did work at the CDC for many, many years in the US, well, he came out and basically said that he believes the data was falsified or buried in a study into the effects of the MMR jab in the US back in the 1990s. And apparently evidence came to light that some African American boys were possibly susceptible to autism having received that jab, but that report was buried. And we're watching closely this guy to see what happens. Like I said, it was late last summer, that he made those revelations. Nobody's heard from the guy since. Nothing has happened to him, but nothing has been heard from him since. The historic sex abuse inquiry in Great Britain has been one massive embarrassment for the establishment in this country. News today, as I'm recording this segment here, that Lord Greville Jenner of Braunstone, who has been linked to child sex abuse over the last 20 years, 20 different men came forward over the years to say that they were abused by this man. It's been announced today by Alison Saunders, who's the Director of Public Prosecutions here in Britain, that he will not be put on trial because it isn't in the public interest to do so. They've cited ill health. The man is 86 years old, amongst other things. He's always denied the charge. It's always important to mention that. Anybody accused of anything is innocent until proven guilty. But campaigners against child sex abuse and campaigners even for a proper, frank and reputable inquiry into historic child sex abuse, they say they are dismayed by decision because they say there is enough evidence to bring this guy to trial. Reading today that ill health is one of the reasons why it isn't in the public interest to pursue the case is very distressing indeed, and it will be distressing for the victims of Jimmy Savile, Leon Britton and of course Cyril Smith. Why should that be any barrier to getting to the truth? You may be aware, you may not be aware, depending on where you're watching the programme in the world, is that the inquiry has been an absolute mess from the word go. Elizabeth Butler-Sloss and Fiona Woolf both had to step down from the inquiry because of their connections to many of the people I just mentioned, Britton, Cyril Smith and others. It's currently being headed up by Justice Lowell Goddard from New Zealand, and again, many people not happy with that. One of the biggest annoyances about the whole inquiry is that victims do not have any representation even. Victims have no representation on the panel. And ironically, in light of Butler-Sloss and in light of Fiona Woolf, the reasons given for no victim presence on the panel is because they wouldn't be objective enough. Now, listeners to the Richie Allen radio show in association with DavidIke.com will know that the subject of police brutality comes up quite regularly. Well, why wouldn't it? I mean, in recent months we've seen shootings, very, very obviously high-profile shootings of unarmed suspects, for want of a better word, by police men in different states in the United States of America. And one of the things that comes up over and over and over again is the murder of homeless man Kelly Thomas in California in 2011. He was beaten to death by 5 or 6 police officers in Los Angeles after being told basically to move on or we will F you up. He was tased and beaten to death. So police brutality is a big subject, an interesting thing. We saw something this week though that I don't think has ever been seen before. Mario Valencia in Arizona. Well, Mario Valencia was obviously a troubled man. He was walking down a street and he was holding a rifle that apparently he had stolen from a Walmart store in his hand. Not good that. I wouldn't be too happy if I happened upon somebody muttering under their breath and walking past me holding a loaded rifle. And he did discharge the rifle and he fired it into the air. It seemed to be under control though, because there was one officer on the scene in a car who was kind of carefully stalking Mr. Valencia and was talking calmly to his dispatch to tell them what was going on. He seemed to have it under control. When out of nowhere, another police car, probably driving at around 40 miles an hour, smacked into Mr. Valencia, shooting him into the air. Take a look at this video.
1U1 PT7.
Okay, never mind. Arizona Brazilian.
Alright, one round just went out into the sky. It's definitely unlocked now. It's definitely loaded. Have units, be prepared.
Is the subject shooting or did you shoot?
Negative, it did not shoot. Unit right there. Just stand off. Stand off. The gun is loaded. Unit on Quatero Park. Stay off. Oh! Jesus Christ, man down.
That suspect survived that hit. Now, according to KOLD, the police...
Unit right there. Just stand off. Stand off. The gun is loaded. Unit on Quatero Park. Stay off.
I've never seen anything like that. I've been covering the news now for over 16 years. I've never seen a police officer do that. His precinct captain has come out and defended him today. Funnily enough, well, not funny enough, you'd expect all the right-wing conservative news channels in the United States, they're loving it. You know, this is great. The guy was a menace to society and he was taken out. So the police officer doesn't look like he's going to face any disciplinary action at all. He said there were businesses in the area and he was carrying a loaded weapon. But, and there's always a but, human rights activists like Randy Short, who's a regular on RT and on the Richie Allen Radio Show and other news, some alternative news programs. He's been alleging recently, and others have been alleging, that there is widespread use of psychotropic drugs within law enforcement community, within the law enforcement community in states all across the United States of America. Psychotropic drugs, well, what does that mean exactly? Well, again, there have been links with serious violent behaviour. People who take psychotropic drugs have been linked to serious violent behaviour. And we have learned over the years, again, about the widespread use of steroids in law enforcement and amongst police officers. I've never seen anything like that. When you put that alongside the recent spate of shootings of unarmed men, let's just say being black in the United States probably should come with a health warning. It's disgusting. So we spend a lot of time in the alternative media reporting on what's wrong, at least what we perceive to be wrong, with the mainstream media. I don't know if you've noticed this, but in the last couple of months, Sky News in the United Kingdom and Fox News in America have been on a kind of a recruitment drive, a drive to register young British people and young American people to vote. Now, on the face of it, you might think, there's not really much sinister, there isn't much wrong with that, Richie, is there? Well, I would think there is. Surely it's the duty, surely it's the remit of a news organisation to report on the news, full stop. Report an event, report it objectively, and let the viewer or the listener make their own mind up. But driving people out to vote. Well, Sky News has been running a campaign that they're spending an enormous amount of money on in the UK. It's called Stand Up and Be Counted. Now, I don't know exactly how much money Sky are spending on this campaign. I've heard figures ranging from £1 million to £3 million UK pounds, British pounds, which is absolutely extraordinary to me. But they've been erecting centres up all over the country, targeting young voters, 18, 19, 20-year-old voters who aren't registered in order to get them to vote. And like I said, it's not just going on in Britain, but it's going on in the US as well. Have a look at this very brief clip of Gretchen Carlson. She's a Fox News presenter. Again, sticking her oar in, putting her oar into the whole debate about why people should vote. Have a look.
Well, time for my take now. Getting involved in politics, or at least being informed about who our political candidates are, I believe is a basic requirement for being an American citizen. But it never ceases to amaze me how little informed so many people are in our society, not only about the political process, but actually taking the time to go vote. Check out the stats. 2012, only 57.5% of our eligible population voted in the presidential election. That's barely more than half. So, how do we change that? I believe it begins with getting young people involved in the political process early. I'm sure you're like me. You've taken your kids or your grandkids with you to the polls to teach them what it's all about when you vote. Voting early and often tends to lead to a lifetime of voting. But we have more work to do here as well. Check this out. In 2004, 18 to 29-year-olds made up only 17% of the voters. In 2008, 18%. And in 2012, up slightly again to 19%. Maybe the presidential candidates in 2016 will do something magical to inspire more people to vote, and more Americans will become informed on the issues as well. You can find my takes every day on my Facebook page and at foxnews.com.
So that was Gretchen Carlson on Fox News. Look, people, in my opinion, the establishment is running scared. It terrifies them It terrorises them even. And I know Bez, whom I'm going to be speaking to a bit later on, he disagrees with me. We'll get into that a bit later on. But I believe that the establishment is absolutely terrified of low turnout numbers in the election here this May in the United Kingdom and in next year's US presidential election. Now, mainstream media, news, cable channels, they love playing vox pops of people who don't know the answers to questions. It makes everybody laugh when people are made out to be dumb. I think it's kind of sinister, though. Isn't it an indictment on those same mainstream news organisations on how misinformed people are? George Washington University in DC is big Clinton town. So you would imagine that students there, when asked to list the achievements of former US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and basically they were being asked what her achievements were as Secretary of State, you would have thought they would have some answers. Not really. Have a look.
I'm Michelle Fields for PJTV, and we're out here at George Washington University asking young Hillary Clinton supporters what they think her biggest accomplishment was as Secretary of State.
I think it'd be really cool to have a woman president, but she'd have to overcome some issues before getting there.
Definitely when you think about the fact that we already have had our first African-American president, I think this is really an era of progression in American politics, and we could set the stage for really set an example for the rest of the world. If we have our first African-American president and then immediately follow that with our first woman president, that would just be amazing.
I'm honestly a huge Hillary fan. I think that Hillary can do a lot for this country. I loved her tenure as Secretary of State. I'm actually doing my senior thesis on it at the moment, so I mean, if I could see her run for president, I'd definitely vote for her.
That would be really cool because she's a woman and it's woman empowerment.
She'd be the first candidate that I would vote for.
I think she should go for it.
Yeah, I agree. Why not?
I think Bill's got a lot of followers and he owes her one, so why not?
I think she's the most obvious Democratic candidate.
I think it would be really interesting to have yet another legacy of like continuing the Clintons. Like we've had multiple Bushes, like having another Clinton, like having just that continued legacy seems kind of weird. But I mean, Hillary is an amazing woman. She's done so much. And the idea of having a woman as president is really exciting. So I think it would be cool.
I think that this country is ready for a female president. I'm not a feminist, but, you know, ready for a new, fresh face out in office.
What do you think is her greatest achievement as Secretary of State?
I'm not really sure.
I'm not that into politics.
I don't know. It's a tough question. I don't know. I really don't know.
Definitely not the Benghazi ordeal.
Don't say
right?
Whoa. I have no clue.
There's just so many. Just the fact that she's been such a world leader and just recognized all over as doing so many great things. Like, I don't even know that I could pick a single accomplishment.
Her soft power approach, I think, was a very big and positive contrast to the previous 8 years under the Bush administration, and I think really, gained America's credibility abroad and was very positive for the U.S. in general.
As Secretary of State, she has just done a great job in not letting things deteriorate. Honestly, I'm not very up to date with politics, but I know she hasn't made a major mistake, and that would definitely be an accomplishment.
What do you think is her greatest achievement as Secretary of State?
Well, she didn't have that many before she gave up that role.
And the way she handled Benghazi was remarkably adept at international affairs, so I really respect her for that.
So you think probably Benghazi is one of her best accomplishments?
I mean, no accomplishment is without fail, but I think that it ranks pretty high up on the level of emergency that it presented and how well it was handled. So yeah, I would definitely say that Benghazi is her high point.
Well, for that, you've got CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and all the colours of the cable news alphabet to blame. Let's get to our guest then. I caught up with him earlier on. He's one of Manchester's most famous sons, formerly of the Happy Mondays and Black Grape. He's thrown his hat into the political ring. His reality party is contesting a number of seats up and down the United Kingdom. He's contesting the seat in Salford, or one of the seats in the constituency of Salford in Greater Manchester. He's standing on the single issue of fracking. He's also very interested in social injustice as well. He's Bez, and I caught up with him earlier on, and this is how that went. Bez, it's absolutely brilliant to see you, mate. It really
nice
is.
One, Richard.
You've had the most amazing career. I mean, you really have. So I suppose, how do you go from the Mondays to the Black Grapes to all of that brilliance, all that madness, to politics? How did you get into this? How did you end up forming the reality party?
Well, the politics really started when I got asked by the people of Barton Moss, the protectors down there. They've been down there all winter. It was getting to a critical stage down there, and there was absolutely no press coverage.
This is the anti-fracking site?
Barton Moss, the anti-fracking site. So we'd been quietly watching what was being going on with the fracking at Balkan, and after the Balkan affair, I thought that was it, you know what I mean, when because it was by pure people numbers that they actually seen him off, and I couldn't believe what was happening in Manchester, so I got invited down. And I've been thinking, I'd actually started fighting revolution 4 years ago. I decided that I was going to do it 4 years ago.
So you knew a bit about fracking then? Anyway, before you went down to Barton Moss, you knew a little bit about what fracking was and what it meant.
Yeah, well, I couldn't actually believe that we was going to go ahead with it, because it's that insane. Who in the right mind would frack inside the city centre? You know what I mean? And the fact that it's all done without no consultation, with no one's talked to us about it, no one's talked about the consequences about it.
No debate at all?
No, absolutely no debate, and we're getting it forced upon us. And we're not even being made aware of any of the dangers. There's nobody from the industry coming forward explaining to us why they think it's a good idea. There's none of that going on, you know what I mean?
And at the same time, Bez, even the right-wing Telegraph newspaper, to its credit, did publish an article where people who used to be in favour of fracking admitted that the actual reserves of shale gas, they're not really there anyway. There's not as much gas there to begin with as they originally thought, so it's not worth the effort anyway, even if it was safe.
Yeah, well, financially, it absolutely makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But the fact is, the fracking, it isn't about creating a new energy. And we found a white paper, the white paper proved, and Cameron also now came out on the last day of Parliament, and with the infrastructure bill, and it's all about the dumping of nuclear waste. They're building a massive port of Salford down here. Earlham's going to disappear in this port of Salford, and we're going to be importing the world's nuclear waste. We've got £55 billion worth already at Sellafield, what we don't know what to do with, and their intentions is to get rid of it all down these fracking wells.
This is one of the biggest stories of the year so far, and as you said, rushed through Parliament on the last day of business.
Yeah, last day of business, so nobody can...
That's right. Opposition MPs, even if there is such a thing, we probably might say there's maybe not such a thing as opposition MPs, but maybe those who might have screamed bloody murder about that and tried to stand up against it, many didn't know anything about it.
Well,
you said just straight through there.
Yeah, straight through, last day of Parliament.
Storing nuclear waste in communities.
There's no opposition to it.
None.
And what can you do on the last day of Parliament? You can't even, can't make a complaint. You can't do anything. You can't even discuss it. It's a done deal. And the thing what we got with this TTIP, because it is TTIP, and basically it's about a transfer of power between Masonic lodges. There was a 200-year deal, and the deal's up now, so there's a transfer of power from the Handovian Lodge, the mother lodge of the English Lodge, to the Stuarts and the Knights Templars, and that's what's going on, and it's this transfer of power after 200 years.
Isn't it funny when you mention Masons to people? I'll give you a laugh. When I was in Spain a few years ago, a guy in Nottingham said to me, "I'm going to recommend you for the Masons." Now, I didn't know anything about the stonemasons. I said, all right. He said, "Oh, Richie, it's almost like a fraternity. If you were in it and other people were in it," he said, "It'd be good for your business." My fiancé had a bar in Spain at the time. He said, "It'd be very good for you." He said, "It's a kind of a glad-handing thing and all of that." Of course, I looked into it a bit more, and stonemasons are a little bit more than just jobs for the boys and looking after them. It's a little bit more serious than that. But the TTIP agreement, Bez, on the face of it, it's the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. And they want to sell it to people, don't they, like this? They want to sell it to people as, well, it's a trade agreement between Europe and America. And it's going to be good. It's going to open up new markets for people. It's going to mean jobs for people. But what they're not telling people is it's one of the most undemocratic things that's ever been drafted up, because it's going to give corporations, one of the most scary things about it is it'll give corporations the chance to sue governments if governments rule against corporations, like Monsanto, for example. Like genetically modified crops and stuff.
Well, it's absolutely incredible, and what we're seeing is actually the end of democracy as we know it. There is no, well, there's not been much democracy, but there was a little inkling of something but now it's completely over, and we're going into this full-on dictatorship with the infrastructure bill and the new trespass laws, which clearly states that they can. Well, it's ending private land, really. So any middle-class people who think you're actually landowners, your land is now being taken off you for corporate profit.
And the proof of this segues back to fracking. The proof of it is when we learned last year that Cameron's coalition government wanted to introduce legislation where if they felt there was shale gas under Bez's house or my house, well, to hell with you if you don't like it. We're going to go under the house and take it anyway.
Well, that's what it is, and it clearly states as well within that infrastructure bill that they can leave any substance behind as well, and which backs up the claims of the nuclear waste.
Before we talk this about the what not just governments here but governments everywhere are doing to poor people and homeless people. I know you've got a big gig coming up this weekend with Black Grape. Magnificent, Black Grape is playing again, which homeless charity will benefit from. Before we talk about that, what can a bloke do, even a bloke with a profile like yours, everybody knows who you are. What can one person do with a new party, the Reality Party? What can you possibly do to change anything? Now, I'm not being depressive, I'm not being pessimistic, but people will say, yeah, Bez is pretty smart, he's on the money, he's well briefed on these issues, but he's only one bloke, what difference does it make?
Well, I like to think that we've already played a massive part in raising awareness about fracking, because so I was got involved. A lot of people like my son's ages and all that, they didn't actually know about fracking, and I've got a son who's 23, 21 saying, Dad, everyone's talking about politics now, and that didn't happen before. So what I'm hoping have done is engage people for the first time in politics. Now, for instance, I was down at Salford Precinct campaigning this Saturday, and we actually signed up there and then registered to vote 60 people who have never voted before, and I made them realise that this is the time now. We've never faced as a nation such pressing times, you know what I mean. We've got the NHS is now being privatised, it's being sold off, so none of us have got any rights to medical care anymore.
Let me just ask you a question on that. When the Labour Party in the UK, obviously led by Ed Miliband, when he says, don't worry about the Tories and privatisation, the NHS is safe in our hands, we wouldn't go down that road. Now, I've got very strong opinions on that. Do you believe him?
Well, it's too late. Cameron's already sold it. How much did he sell it for? Some ridiculous knockdown bargain basement price. It was sold about 3 weeks ago.
Well, different hospitals and different care pathways. That's what
if Labour are going to come back and give the money back and say renationalise it all, you know what I mean? I don't see how they're going to do it, and I don't think Labour. Well, it's Labour who actually caused all the trouble, because we've got this two-party politics thing going on, and everyone's forgotten already. It was Labour who's caused all the trouble anyway. It was Gordon Brown who actually sold all our gold in 2002 and signed the deal for TTIP. So it was actually Labour policies what have actually got us in this mess now.
The truth is there's no difference between any of them. And even in Salford last week, 7 of them stood there. Plaid Cymru were there, the Scottish National Party were there, obviously Labour, the Conservatives and so on, and the Lib Dems and the Greens. But ultimately, to me it looked like an exercise by ITV and Sky to make it look like there were 7 people with 7 different visions for the future. But ultimately, Ben, when it comes to tackling terrorism, which I believe is grossly exaggerated anyway, the threat of terrorism, when it comes to TTIP and all of this, there's no difference between any of these people. They are people wearing different masks, but ultimately they're following the same path, which is the corporate path, which is sell everything to.
Well, which is a fascist regime, really. You know what I mean? And we're moving into a full-on fascist state. And the best example I can give really is Farage. And the same thing was going on, exact same thing before World War II, but with Mosley and the black shirts. And people were rising then, stopping the evictions, people getting together, and there was a social revolution. Like there's a bit of a social revolution going on now where people are waking up.
Well, you look at Tom Crawford in Nottingham, all those people that turned up to stop him losing his house. He's paid his mortgage 4 or 5 times over. But without telling him over the years, the banks kept changing the details of the mortgage. And they said they want him out now. And 3 or 4 times in the last year, they've tried to get him out of his house. And thousands of people from all over Britain have turned up on eviction day and prevented him from doing that, which I think is an amazing thing. Which goes along with what you're saying, that there is a real gathering, rising protest movement that is gathering a real head of steam, I think. I used to be depressed. I used to think, oh, people complained for a little bit. Occupied, he went out, they said some really important stuff, they were good, but then he got fed up and he went home. I don't see that happening now. I see people being more committed than ever before.
Yeah, well, it's because of what's happening and with sanctions, the NHS, the legal aid system.
Talk about sanctions, basically.
Yeah.
This is going to be seen by a lot of people in America. They don't really understand benefits. I mean, we can explain benefits. When somebody doesn't have a job, the government provides a certain amount of money on a weekly or on a fortnightly basis to tide them over, to make sure that they have at least living expenses. Now, we know that the benefits don't quite add up to living expenses. They give them X amount of money. But the government has hired various companies over the years. A recent, very controversial company was a company called Atos to look after all of this. And what a lot of people don't know, particularly outside of Britain, is that these companies spend most of their time trying to find ways to get people off benefits. Talk about that.
Well, what they're doing is they're sanctioning people, so they're getting, like Al said before, you get a 12-week sanction. After 12 weeks of no money, no rent, no, you're getting evicted from your home. They're giving mentally ill people who are incapable of looking after themselves, they're now giving them their benefit rent, for the rent. They're giving them that money in their hand, knowing that these people have got drug, alcohol problems. You know what I mean? So they're purposely creating homelessness.
That's a good idea. Instead of giving it to the landlord to keep them, at least keep a roof over their head, but giving it to people like that, nobody could convince me there's any sense in that.
Well, it's been deliberately done, and like next year in America and that, there's no such thing as social security. They don't have that, but you got to pay private insurance, and you get so much benefits on society. I think it's 12 months you get it for. But so it's all happening really.
You said to me yesterday that you're convinced what they really want to do in this country is to remove benefits altogether. And get rid of them. I think, correct me if I'm wrong there, because we were having a chat on the phone yesterday, you were busy, I was busy. But I think you said that you see them slowly but surely getting to a stage where, if you've worked and you've paid national insurance, you will get some benefit for a limited amount of time. But if you haven't, you don't get anything.
You don't get anything.
That's in some European countries. I think Sweden is one of them. There are 1 or 2 others. So basically, if you're starting out, you come out of school, you're looking for a job, you can't get one, it's kind of screw you, mate. You think that's coming down the line?
Definitely, and they're going to make everybody work for the benefits, and I don't think they're going to be on the the national wage. Well,
that's when we spoke on radio before, you said this, and I thought it was absolutely spot on. How can you insist that people work for their benefits, but then not pay them the minimum wage?
Not pay the minimum wage.
Because it must be said, benefits are not the minimum wage. Benefits average about 140 to 150 pounds a month. That's the base, unless you get housing assistance and child support assistance. So let's just say 150 times. So let's say 300 pounds for a bloke on his own a month. That's not minimum wage.
Well, but I like I say, I was out campaigning and I'm meeting people who are suffering sanctions. Have had the benefit. Some people are living on £30 a week. They have £30 a week to live on it. Nobody can live on £30 a week. It's absolutely impossible. You know what I mean?
He didn't try it, did he? The Work and Pensions Secretary, Ian Duncan Smith. He stupidly said 2 years ago that people could live on it. But then when he was challenged by you, to be fair, and others, to try and live on it, he wasn't quick to take up the challenge, was he?
Well, you can't. It's absolutely impossible.
Of course it's impossible,
It costs you £5 for fish and chips these days, you know what I mean? So how can you live on £30 a week? I don't know. But one of my ideas is we've got to take responsibility back for our food chain and start creating community again. Community grows, and taking back some responsibility, not depending on corporates to provide everything for you.
Now in America, and this is true, and I know, well, we'd never say anything that wasn't true we couldn't prove. In New York State, I don't know about New York City, but in New York State and in Washington DC and in California, in some communities and some counties, they are making it illegal to grow your own vegetables in your own garden.
And collect water,
rainwater. And collect rainwater. Now, I've yet to hear of any such proposals here in England, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody thinks about it eventually.
Yeah, well, one of the things I've been doing at the moment, because I live on land and I'm living in such a way that I'm trying to produce all my own food, create all my own energy, make my own medicines.
How difficult is it, to be sustainable? For yourself and your partner, how difficult is that?
It's a lot of hard work, and you need to do it in as groups of people, and that's why we need to start creating community again. So people are working together doing this, but it is doable, definitely doable. And but the thing is, we've got the threat of GM crops coming, and the thing with these GM crops and Monsanto is you got to buy seed off these people every year, and you can
Terminator seeds. Hilarious. The death of life. Farmers they collect seed, they sow seed from last year's crop. That's life, and it goes on. Only an evil, filthy company can think of Terminator seeds. They work once and then they're gone. And we patent them. And you have to buy them from us.
You're not allowed to save them for next year as well. You get done for saving seeds and that. So what I've been doing is by collecting heirloom seeds, organic heirloom seeds, and I've got quite a collection now, you know what I mean? But the problem we've got when these GM crops actually do arrive in England, and they will be arriving because we've got seed sip, we can't stop them. Once their pollen's gone into the country, it'll absolutely wreck our environment.
People need to understand that what you were saying is 100% true. What TTIP is all about is allowing companies like Monsanto into Britain by the back door. Because at the moment, our foodstuffs, at least to the best of our knowledge anyway, they don't contain genetically modified ingredients. They don't, at least to the best of our knowledge. We were talking about Kellogg's the other day because they have £640 million worth of sales in Britain every year. They don't pay any taxes. But genetically modified crops came up. And if you buy Kellogg's cereal in America, there's a good chance GM corn will be in the Kellogg's. But over here, not. But people should be terrified of that. I've got to say this before we move on. We've not got all day, but just before we move on. When you were touring around the world with the Mondays,
go on.
If anybody had said to you, you'll be an environmental campaigner, you'll be living in a sustainable way, you'll be campaigning in the general election in Salford, back in the day, you'd have laughed in their face.
Yeah, I would have laughed. I find it absolutely incredible that it's not actually my job to be doing this, and I feel compelled.
I think it is your job. I think it's everybody's job. I think it's my job. It's my job to try and make sure, in as little way as I possibly can, that people hear it. And thanks to Beyond Vision here and Hayden and Live Leak will be putting this out and everything, and David Icke will put this out as well. It'll get to lots of people. That's my job. But I think it is your job. I think in the absence of any real alternative to these austerity policies, what's happening to our food and all of that, I think guys like you with a conscience who have and let's be honest, it's a pretty big fan base and a pretty big following, I think it is your job, mate. I'm glad you're here. But can I just say this, because we can't forget this. Speaking to Alan, who's your manager who looks after you, we were speaking earlier on, I've been amazed at, I shouldn't be really because maybe I'm being a bit naive, at the opposition to a guy like you doing what you're trying to do in little ways. Alan was telling me about a bank account and hassle with that.
Yeah.
So obviously you're entitled to ask people to help fund a campaign to donate. So you tell us about that.
Yeah, well, we've been scuppered in many ways. We've had the electoral commission trying to get rid of us. We've got the banking system who won't activate our account, so we can't take any donations. We've got getting.
Tell us how that works, right? You have. Let's not mention the bank for a minute, because I'm going to give him a ring after this and give him a bit of stick. So, and I will do. So we won't mention them for the time being, but we will mention them later on. So you set up a bank account then, and you get an IBAN number, you get a sort code, you get a number, and your campaign team should be able to say, right, folks, this is it. If you got a $5, if you got a $10, if you got a little bit more, put it in the account. People can't.
Yeah, well, we have donators, and people have been trying to put money into our bank account for us, and it just won't go in. We keep phoning the bank up saying, listen, we've got donations coming into what people want to donate to us. They can't put money into the bank account. Every time they put money into the bank account, it gets sent back again. They've actually said now, is it three different occasions that they've now sorted our bank account out and we can use it. Can we use our bank account?
But you've tried then, you've immediately gone to try and put some money in there.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you can't.
Well, we've got people waiting to put money in. We can't take donations because we get scuppered by even.
Have you tried, just as a matter of interest? I mean, I've used it before. I didn't find it very helpful. Have you tried Bitcoin or PayPal or any of those? Have you tried that?
Well, Bitcoin you can only use on the dark web, innit, really? So outside the dark web, you can't really spend the money. You know what I mean? So,
it's not the easiest way in the world for people to donate.
Yeah. So
PayPal maybe is an option, no?
Yeah, PayPal. There's other ways where we can actually do it.
But it doesn't matter anyway. It's absolutely outrageous that you have a bank account. Alan was telling me earlier on, there's a couple of quid in there, so it's an alive, active account, and yet people can't put money.
Yeah, well, we can't take money in or out at the moment. And another
they
thing,
don't like you, Bess, because the Hazel Blears, former front bench cabinet member of Blair's government, is not going to be standing in. If she had been, you'd have been going up against her in Salford. There's definitely an opportunity, I think, for you to win that seat in Salford. I mean, I wouldn't say that if I didn't mean it. So obviously, certain people are not going to like that.
Well, the biggest problem with this seat and what we're going for, because we've got this thing now called the Northern Powerhouse, which is the devolution of Manchester from London.
Yeah.
So the banking.
Big buzzword.
Yeah. X amount of pounds. We're going to run our own. But the people who are running our city are all absolutely unelected, so we're going to have a Lord Mayor's position. They're not elected by anybody, they're placed there by the government. And incredibly, Hazel Blair is one of the people up for running for this Lord Mayor's position. And she's already been proven to be dishonest. She's been caught with taking £19,000 out of the expenses.
Is that a fact? Because I'm not aware of that. Is that an absolute fact?
That's an absolute fact. She gave it back, granted, but she never got done for it. Imagine if me and you stole £19,000.
Not saying I don't believe it, but if it isn't a fact, we'll edit this out just at this point. But if we don't, we won't. And
the fact is, she has been caught with her fingers in the till. She gave the money back, but she's one of these people up for the Lord Mayor's position. Ian Stewart, who is the Lord Mayor of Salford, is now being offered, when he leaves this position, guess what he's got?
Well,
he's got a job at Peel Holdings.
You're not serious.
Yeah, this is no kidding. He's got a job at Peel,
which is the very definition of the revolving door system. We make decisions in government that benefit corporations. When we get voted out or when we retire, we go and work for them.
Yeah, you go work for him.
And at that point, there should be a criminal investigation, but there never is it?
No, and it's absolutely incredible what's going on. And the thing about this Northern Powerhouse, they're accountable to nobody. They're totally unelected. So you know what I mean. So it's another it's another dictatorship, because if somebody's put in a position of power and they've not been
elected, people haven't had a choice to put them in there. Got to ask you this, because we've only got a couple more minutes. I imagine more than anybody else, you're a famous guy. And you're not the first famous man or woman to decide, right, I'm going to throw the hat in the ring, as it were, on an issue. You're not the first one. But I'm guessing nobody is probably more pigeonholed than you in terms of people's perceptions.
Yeah.
People will look at Bez and they will go, Jesus, the ultimate party animal, that guy. He's had the time of his life, like with the Mondays, Black Grape and everything. And some people will say, I bet he's serious, but he'll be serious up to a point and then he'll get fed up of it and he'll go back to what he does with the Mondays or Black Grape or something else. I know you were in South America recently recording and stuff like that. But I get the impression that this is serious stuff for you.
Yeah.
And that it's not a career move as much as a vocation for you, a big life change.
Well, what it is I put every minute of his spare time into this, and it takes a lot of effort, and I'm doing it because I truly believe this is our last chance. And if we don't do something collectively now, then it's too late. You know what I mean? This is the last chance the people can use what system we've got left to benefit us all. And I believe after May that will be it. And I'd be surprised if there's any more elections after May. You know what I mean? Yeah.
You think because I did agree with you earlier on. I did say that I think the groundswell of unrest is bigger than it's ever been. I think Alan agreed with that earlier on in the green room. So you think this is going to be the watershed moment, that after this people have had enough?
I think like I say, we're definitely moving into a dictatorship where us the people, we don't have any involvement in democracy. We don't say what is going to happen to the country with the fracking, with the proposed using it as a nuclear dumping ground. So 69% of this country could possibly be a dumping ground for the world's nuclear waste. And
unthinkable that.
Unthinkable, and it's absolutely incredible. So, like I say, we have got numbers, and that's why I managed to sign 60 people up who never voted before in Salford. When I explained the positions to them, these people are taking power on so little numbers. You know what I mean? It's incredible.
As you said, not elected. I like hearing about guys like you doing that. I get worried when Sky News have a big programme they're running at the moment where they're trying to register young voters. Now that is really sinister, that, you know, a corporation owned by News Corp, owned by Rupert Murdoch, taking it upon themselves to go out and get Britain's 17, 18, is it 18 in this country? Vote 18, so it must be 18-year-olds, register to vote. I think that's kind of sick, that, because Sky has an editorial policy. They have a point of view, which is a conservative, which is a Rupert Murdoch point of view. And for them to be involved in beefing up the numbers only tells me that people like you are right. They're really scared of a really low turnout. They're terrified of that, of what it means. Because if less than 40% of the population goes out and votes, then nobody can claim a mandate, can they?
Well, I think this election, they've made it even harder for people to vote, because what people don't realise, you have to register to vote. So in the old days, one person, everyone's polling card used to come to the house.
Yeah, that's right. It's the same in Ireland. That's right.
But now each person has to individually register, and that's what people don't realise. So
do you think they don't want people voting?
No, they don't want people voting.
I disagree.
Yeah.
I'm glad we found something to disagree on. Because I think they're terrified of there being no interest in it, because that in itself then is the biggest statement that people can ever make. So say 3 out of 10 people
I think they've made it
harder.
I think they've made it harder to vote in this election, and what people don't realise, and I've been pointing out to them, they don't realise they cannot vote unless you've registered. And so I think the numbers in this election is going to be the lowest you've ever seen.
I think so as well, but I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I mean, that's maybe where we slightly disagree on that, mate. So I will undoubtedly let people know about where they can make a donation to your campaign.
Right, nice one.
The best of luck with it, mate. I think it's absolutely brilliant what you're doing. I agree with you on the issues of fracking, nuclear waste dumping, attacking the poorest in society, mocking them, putting silly TV programmes on about benefits claimants, ridiculing them is disgraceful, and I think you're marvellous, mate. I want to show the best.
Thanks a lot.
Look after yourself.
Nice one, Richard. Nice one, mate.
Bez there talking to me earlier on. And of course, we'll watch his progress in the election carefully next month. That wraps up the first episode of the Richie Allen television show. Thank you very much for watching it. I enjoyed your company. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time, of course, but in the meantime you can follow the program on the social media channels, the information flashing up on screen now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.